There we are. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to PBR Monday at a couple of minutes here. Uh, Give everybody a chance to let the room populate a little bit. As always, there's three places you can watch this. You can watch it on here on the Tour of Idaho Facebook page. You can also watch it in the motorcyclejazz.com Facebook page and YouTube page. So if you prefer YouTube, there's a place you can watch it there too. Just find the motorcyclejazz.com page and we streamed it there too. If you want to answer questions, or if you want to ask questions and you want to have me answer them live, please make sure to give StreamYard your credentials when it asks, so that I see a name attached to a question. A lot of times I see questions and I don't know who's asking the question. Those are less likely to be answered than if I can see your name. If for some reason you have trouble with the credentials, just type your name in when you ask the question, and that'll help me out a little bit. I hope that I'm confident we'll be able to get through tonight, but I'm a little worried about the dread freeze frame. It's snowing to beat the band here tonight. And whenever it snows, even though I'm line of sight with the tower, it slows things down quite a bit. So we'll just have to see what we can do. And I see the room's filling up pretty fast tonight. I looked last week and we had like at one point, I think 100 people, which was pretty crazy. Hopefully we'll get a good attendance again this week. We are going to talk about day one this week, and as soon as 7 o'clock rolls around, we'll jump right into it. It'll probably take me about 45 minutes to get through the things that I want to talk about in day one, and then we'll leave the last 15 minutes for question and answer. Feel free to ask questions anytime you want through there, though. Again, if they pop up and there's a name associated with them, I'll try to get to them right away. See, we're just about there. A little elixir of the gods there. Hope you all are doing well. Had a good day today. Went for my first motorcycle ride in about a year, and it felt pretty good. Didn't have any trouble controlling the bike or anything. I went out and I found the worst, nastiest trail I could find that's open this time of year around here, out in the desert, and rode my big pig. Rode my 450 dual sport bike with dual sport tires on it down some sandy single track out in the desert, and I actually had a really good time. It was I bombed the pressure way up in the tires to make it as slicky as I could, and they say it's like riding a bike, right? Once you learn how, you never forget. I was a little more tired than I usually am at the end of that loop, just because I haven't been on a bike in a long time, and I'm not real eager to go falling off on my right hip anytime soon. But other than that, it was a really good day. I had a good time out there, so hopefully I'll be able to get through the summer without any major get-offs. And if I can, by the time a year rolls around, I think it's basically fully healed and good as new. I got to take it a little easy this summer, but I think I will be able to ride. I see Sean. I see Ralph. I see Juan. Juan, good to see you, partner. Haven't talked to you in a while. Long time no talk to. Juan Brown, an internet celebrity, is on here tonight. Well, all right. I'm seeing it's 7 o'clock, so let's get rolling. First things first, before we talk into riding day one, let's talk about the best time to start out on day one. And first, let's talk day of the week. Basically, any day of the week is just as good as the next, as long as it's not Saturday. Saturday is the worst day to start day one on the tour, because that means your off day in Pocatello, half the stuff that you need to see is closed. You're not going to be able to go to see Smoot about your boots or anything like that. A lot of the places that you go to for the supplemental challenge points are closed on Sunday. Barry's is closed. Vintage Vinyl is closed. Pocatello Power Sports is closed. So I don't recommend Saturday at all. That's not a good day to start. Friday is better, but be aware of the fact that some things close really early on Saturday in Pocatello. So I would say I would not advise a Saturday start at all. And I would say a Friday start is fine as long as you're aware of the fact that PPS closes at 2 in the afternoon, and some of the other places close a little early on Saturday as well. They have earlier hours. Pocatello's an outdoor rec town, baby, and on the weekends everybody wants to go out and play. So you're not going to find an awful lot of places that carry things that you might need that are going to be open all day Saturday the way they are on Friday. Any other day of the week is just fine. You can look forward further into the tour and see that, like, maybe it's a little bit better if you're not at Powell Ranger Station on a weekend. It might be a little bit easier to get accommodations if you're there on anything other than a Friday and a Saturday night. So you might think about that a little bit, but it doesn't really make that much difference anywhere else along the tour. You're going to be just fine. Going across the Magruder Road on a Saturday and Sunday is not my favorite thing, but just take it easy and you'll be fine there. Now, most of you are aware, and all of you should be aware, that are planning a 2021 tour of the phenomenon of the Braun Brothers reunion in Chalice. And they switched weeks on us again this year. It's on the day 4 page. I think that's when that is. You're not going to get any accommodations in Chalice the 3 days of the Braun Brothers reunion. And it might be a little tough the day before and the day after as well. The last time I had some guys successful in getting accommodations in Chalice during the Braun Brothers weekend it's more than a weekend. It's like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Some guys found an Airbnb up there somewhere. It cost them a pretty penny, but they were able to do that. But the hotels are booked out months in advance. So that's another thing that you're going to want to factor into your planning. Don't start out on a day that's going to put you in Chalice during that 3 days of the Braun Brothers reunion. You're not going to be very happy about the accommodation situation. So the next thing is, we said days of the week. Saturday's the only day that's actually a bad day to start. Friday is a little bit compromised because of the short openings of Saturday in Pocatello. What about times of the season to do the tour? Well, it officially opens the 15th, and it closes in September, fairly early in the month. I think we say you have to, the last day is the 21st or something like that. In that period of time, I wouldn't want to be the first team out, especially if I'm solo, because I know it doesn't seem like this, even to some of you that live in places like Salt Lake City and maybe over in Portland and along the West Coast. But in the Intermountain West, snow persists up high in the trees for a long, long time. And it takes forever to get some of that stuff cleared out. So if you show up raring to go on July 15th, I would say that you better be prepared to saw an awful lot. And if you're a soloist, most years you're not going to make it. You're just going to run into too much stuff that you're going to have to saw, and you're going to wear yourself out. We bust our butts to get all that stuff sawed. There's a ton of us that go out and saw. The Idaho Parks and Rec people are fantastic at helping us out with this thing. But it's just a big job. There's a lot of trail that's got to be sawed. And some of it you can't even get into until around the 1st of July. Some of the trails don't open until July 1st, technically, so it takes a few weeks to get them sawed out after that. So I never, ever recommend that anybody try to jump the gun and be like the first team across. That's just typically not going to work. In years past, we've had guys that have showed up and said, well, we showed up June 1st to did it. And I'm going, yeah, whatever. Without a beacon track, I'm very skeptical of that claim. It's just really tough. The week I've always started out historically has been the very last few days of July. I usually start like the 29th or 30th or 31st of July, in through there somewhere. That's when I've generally done it. What that does is typically stuff is cut out. The closer you get to the 1st of August, things are cut pretty well. And you're typically a little bit ahead of forest fire season. Forest fire season typically drops down on us like right in the middle of August. Reason being that in Idaho, you all that don't live here won't see this, but parts of Idaho look like Ireland up until around the July 4th weekend. And it can still get pretty cold in most places around here in June. My birthday's June 18th, and it snowed on my birthday probably a third of the time since I've lived in Idaho. It's remarkable. One time I was riding a street bike back from Bear Lake on July 4th, and I nearly froze. I thought I was going to get hypothermia. But in the middle of July, things dry out, and for about 6 to 8 weeks, it stays really dry. There's no precipitation, so we get a lot of sunshine. We get a persistent high-pressure system that sits in over a lot of the southern and central part of the state. And things just start to dry out, but it takes them a while to dry out. And we get dry storms when you get a weather pattern reversal called a monsoon that usually rolls in around the first week of August. And when that monsoon comes in, the winds start coming up from the south. They bring a lot of dry thunderstorms, and that's what sparks the fires that bedevil us in the Intermountain West. So historically, the fire season starts sometime after that first week in August. So in the middle of August, that's a really good time to do it because the days are still pretty long. Temperatures are starting to cool down some in a lot of cases. But fire season's a problem. If you can wait, the best time I have ever done the tour of Idaho was I started right at the end of August, and I rode it over the Labor Day weekend. That was in the middle of my tour sometime, Labor Day weekend. I think I set off on, I don't know what day Labor Day was that year, but I set off at the end of August, and I finished like September 5th, 6th, 7th, somewhere through there, first week of September. It's fantastic. The weather was really good. I was cold a lot. Sun goes down significantly earlier that late in the season, and you're going to be cold an awful lot, but you won't be hot that much. And things start to clear out. You're sort of getting into the beginning of hunting season a little bit, but you're still a little bit before it there. The only thing that you have to watch if you are going to wait that late is that trails start closing around September 7th, September 9th. And there's only a few of them, and it's not a serious problem until you get up on later in September. But by the end of the month, there's enough stuff closed, you basically can't do a tour of Idaho. And even if you could, it wouldn't be a very good idea because at the end of September, the beginning of October, that's when you start getting pretty significant mountain snows. You could end up in some trouble. So if you can wait until the end of August, I think that's a pretty good time to do it. But just be aware of the fact that you can get extremely cold if you wait that late. It can be a big problem. So that's all I can tell you about, days of the week to avoid starting and times of the year to avoid starting. It's a shame because it's like a 7-week season, maybe 8 weeks if we push it. There's not a lot of time in there. But right around the 1st of August, I think, is the primo time. Or right around the end of August, I think, is another really good time. But, any time during the season, it's open. The trails are all legally open, so you can give her a go and see how far you get. If July 15th is absolutely when you want to go, I'm going to wish you the best of luck. I'm going to really be concerned that you're going to end up sawing an awful lot. Typically, we name the first team out every year Saws a Lot or some variation of Saws a Lot because that's what's going to happen. And it's kind of funny because every year that first team typically finds out why they got named that. And as soon as they drop out, if they do, which is so far every year except for one has happened, everybody else is like, oh, man, now I got to do all that sawing. So I would wait if I were you. I'd put it off. I wouldn't jump right on it and try to do it the 15th. I'd wait at least a week. And again, I always waited till the end of July. So now let's start talking about day one. Day one is a very long, difficult day. I don't know that there is a day on the tour that's more difficult any more than day one. There is a day that is as difficult, and that would be day 8. Day 8 is as difficult as day one. It's not as long, but you're a lot farther away from anybody most of the day. Day 8 has a mental aspect to it that day one probably doesn't have. On day one, you can see the freeway most of the day. You can see I-15. You ride to the east of it, then you ride to the west of it, then you go back east of it. But you can see the freeway most of the day. Your cell phone works everywhere. You'll be able to get wonderful selfies, and your Instagram will look great. And you're never more than maybe 10 or 15 miles from gas. There's plenty of places along the way to stop and get a snack. It just doesn't have the feeling of remoteness that some of the days later in the tour do. But it's a long day. Depending on the variation that you do, it's 200-plus miles. And I think even the solo variation is up around 200 these days. And it probably is the day that has the most technical trail on it. It's a lot of bumpy technical trails, a lot of single track And even the double track is not as much fun as you think it might be. Every year we get people to go, double track, how hard can it be? Well, let's talk at the end of day one, see if you still feel that way. And if you do, there's more for you on day 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There's some double track that's bumpy. It'll slow you down a little bit. Last year there was a guy that broke his leg on a double track trail, spiral fracture of the tib and fib. Ride a double track trail. You got to slow down those things. You cannot be bailing down those trails at 35 and 40 miles an hour because there's unpleasantness around every corner. Those of you who ride a lot of quad trails know that typically, the quads really chew up trails. So even if the trail machine goes through and buffs that trail to immaculateness, a week later it's all torn up again. They're nasty, they're bumpy trails. We use them because it's better than taking you down a dirt road or a gravel road. Sometimes they're pretty scenic, but the trails themselves are rarely that much fun. So there's a ton of single track on day one. Some of it's a little challenging, but there's a lot of it. Even when it's easy, it goes and goes and goes. And then it turns into a quad trail. And then when it's a dirt road, there's some gates you got to open and close. The hardest part is late in the afternoon. It's getting over Robber's Roost. That's probably there's a few little places earlier in the morning that are equally technical, but they're really short. Robber's Roost is kind of sustained. The challenge section is one of the hardest if you decide to do that, which I don't recommend. And navigation is a little bit of an issue. Day one is going to test your ability to basically navigate, and it's going to tell all of us how well you studied the aerial photos and the maps and all the resources that are available to you in advance. Because if you did, you're going to understand that in places there's not one trail, there's like a half a dozen. And if you study the maps carefully and you've made good notes, you're going to be able to navigate pretty well from one waypoint to the next. Most of the day it's fairly obvious, but in places it's not obvious at all, and you got to figure that out. On the topic of the route book, by the way, a couple people have PM'd me in the last few days about what about the route book? I don't see a link for it this year. Nothing wrong with those PMs, so I'm going to answer that question for everybody tonight all at once. This year, there's not a link that says route book. What I recommended, and it's right there in the route description, is that every browser in the world will allow you to create a PDF of that page, which is all I ever did anyway. I just made a PDF of the page and linked to it. You can do that yourself, and you should. So in terms of the written route description, just go to the top of your browser. If it won't do it, get an extension that'll do it. But all of them will create a PDF for you of those pages, and just print them on some good waterproof paper, and you're good to go. What I am going to do is I'm going to create kind of a little bit of a pictorial route guide, but I've been thinking about the amount of effort involved in that, and I've got enough other things to do that I don't think I'm going to be able to do that for all 10 days. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to do it for day one, and I'll put it out there as a template about the way that and I've always done something like this for myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish a copy of the way I make my own notes for day one. And then you can use that. You can do it for days 2 through 10 yourself if you want to, just using what I've done as a template. If you have a copy of the 100K maps, if you have a copy of the route book, or what I should say are the pages on Mojazz, which is what we call a route book, and you make some notes, you should be just fine. You won't have any trouble. Something else that someone asked that's an excellent question is, look, is it okay if we load up the ArcGIS layer that's got all of the MVUMs on it? Absolutely, you should do that. If you want to have MVUMs as your base map on your TrailTech Voyager Pro, which now allows you to do that if you have the latest firmware upgrade, I think that's nothing but a good idea. But what you're not allowed to do is superimpose your own route over top of that, where like you drew a line or you got somebody else's tracks. You just can't use routes or tracks, whether they're created by you or anybody else. So that base map will have my waypoints and any waypoints that you add superimposed over it. Now, for those of you who've already been doing your homework and are looking at are comparing my waypoints to the MVUMs, when you compare it to the MVUMs, I'd be amazed if many of you haven't already found out that on the MVUMs, it looks like my waypoints are way off the trail in places. Like, there ain't no trail there. The trail goes somewhere else. Then look at it on the aerial photos, and what do you see? The waypoint's right where it needs to be, and the MVUM is wrong. The MVUMs are notoriously wrong. They're wrong in places that will screw you good, too. The waypoints are good. The MVUMs are a handy guide, but they're not as reliable as the waypoints. The waypoints are where they need to be. And if they're not, you let me know. Always the proviso, as I said last week, GPS is an imperfect technology. You know, if the waypoint is just a few meters off the trail somewhere, don't worry about that. That's GPS drift. But you should be able to verify in advance by looking at these things in the aerial photos that, yeah, I see that in this aerial photo, this waypoint looks like it's sitting right in the middle of the trail here. When you get there, if it doesn't appear to be there, since you've already studied that, you know, well, my GPS is just a little bit off right here. 3-meter accuracy is all they promise with those things. And 3 meters can be pretty far off the trail sometimes. If you're using a Trail Tech Voyager Pro or any of the better Garmin's, 3 feet is as far off the trail as or 3 meters is as far off the trail as I ever see it. Generally, with my Trail Tech Voyager Pro, when I look at my track later that I created, I can figure out which side of the trail I got off on to take a whiz when I needed to do it. So, day one. Let's talk about day 0 first when you get here. Don't get here at 9 o'clock at night and sleep in a sleeping bag at the head of the trail, as people have done in the past. That's a bad strategy for starting. If it were me, I would get here plenty early the day before. In fact, if you're coming from sea level, if you're coming from back east or you're coming from down in California and you haven't spent a lot of time in altitude, I'd get here a minimum of a day early just to kind of get myself as acclimatized as I could, because you're going to feel the altitude in the first day. Because within 45 minutes, you're going to be at nearly 9,000 feet, working pretty hard to get there. So don't come rolling in at the last minute and jump on your bike and take off. I know people that have shown up, have driven all night to get here, unload their bikes at the trailhead, and started off on the hardest day. You know, I'm not saying that you can't do it, but I'm just saying it's not a great strategy. You got 10 hard trail days, and day 1 is one of the 2 most difficult. You kind of want to give yourself a little chance to relax the day before, unwind, sort all your stuff out in your hotel room, and make sure it's good. Hotel Malad takes really good care of tour riders. There are some other options in Malad, but Hotel Malad is a place we recommend. People there like tour riders. They know what you guys are doing. There's a place a couple blocks away to park your rig. There's a link to it in the route description, and you can leave your car there for 10 days or 2 weeks, and it'll be just fine. Every year I talk to the Chamber of Commerce to make sure it's pretty copacetic, and every year for the last 8 or 10 years they've said, yep, it's just fine. So you're going to get to the Hotel Malad, hopefully early the day before. And if it were me, I would make sure that I was up by 3 in the morning, getting the bikes ready to go. You know, you want to be kind of cool getting out of there. Don't cause a big ruckus or anything like that. But I would be on the road rolling south towards the start of the trail by 4 in the morning. I think that's a pretty good idea. It's a real easy ride down some country roads to get there. And I think there's even a gas station that they built now at the exit that sits right there close to the start of the trail. So you might even be able to get fuel down there now. I'll verify that before tour season started, but the last time we went to Salt Lake City about a month ago, I'm pretty sure I saw what looked like a gas station off that exit there. But anyway, probably if you get rolling around 3:30 in the morning, it'll be around 4 o'clock when you roll up to the quad trail that starts the tour. And there's a few gates you got to open and close. It'll be dark. If you're smart, you'll take it a little bit easy. If you do that, that will get you to the Idaho-Utah border, challenge point number 1. I think it's waypoint 3, but challenge point number 1. It'll get you there right around the time the sun's coming up during most of the tour season. In September, that won't be true, but in July, it'll certainly be true, and through most of August, the sun is coming up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. So if you're on the Idaho-Utah border at about 5 in the morning, the sun will be coming up, and you'll be able to kind of see from there on out. I think it's a mistake if you are on there's a place you got to hike to. The next waypoint is the next waypoint is the rock slide. The next challenge point, excuse me. The next challenge point after the beginning is the rock slide. Then there's a challenge point on top of Oxford Peak that you have to hike to. Sort of a pretty good metric for me is you should be up there by about 7 or 7:30 in the morning. Any later than that, you're really putting yourself in peril of getting to Pocatello by midnight, which, remember, on day one, we have a hard and fast rule. You must be to the Tour of Idaho flagpole by midnight. If you're there 30 seconds after midnight, it's a DQ, and that's for your safety. We made day one deliberately harder several years ago just because we had so many people. Day one didn't used to be hard. It used to be kind of a warm-up day. And people would ride it, and they get cocky. They go, well, is this all you got? Then they go out and they get hurt or get lost somewhere way deeper in the tour where it's a little harder to get to them. So we just said, okay, well, we're going to make day one of the two hardest days so you know what you're getting into. If you cannot make it to the flagpole by midnight, that is a sign. The great wheel in the sky is trying to tell you something, and you should listen to what it's trying to tell you. You need to go to a T2 or you need to reload and do something else. Also on day one, we expect you to stick close to the route. Last year, there were 2 or 3 teams that like circle back to Malad in the middle of the day, or they went to this weird truck stop that's way off the route somewhere. And it wasn't a problem because all those teams eventually retired from the tour. But I know the reason that you do things like that. You're doing things like that because in one case they had someone that was following them, and it was just easier to meet them at that truck stop than it was to meet them anyplace else. Stay on the trail. There's Downey's a good place where you can stop and get some snacks if you want to, and not too far from down out of Hot Springs. The little town of Downey exists. You can zip up the highway, zip right back down, get on the route. We tell people you could do that. Lava Hot Springs is a good place to go. But don't be wandering way off the route to some truck stop that's nowhere actually close to the Tour of Idaho. That's gonna at very least it's gonna cost you some challenge points. And at the most, I'm gonna be saying, what in the world were you doing at this truck stop that's 13 miles off the route? It just doesn't make any sense. So stick to the route. The other thing about day one is this is not a race. There is no prize for getting to Pocatello first. A reasonable time to get to Pocatello, if you have set off, like I said, 3:30, 4 in the morning, you probably get here around 7 o'clock at night. That's when most teams do it. I see riders between 5 and 9. All the strong teams are somewhere between 5 and 9. The soloists get a little bit of a break because their route is not as long. It's a little easier for them to do. The 3-person teams have a much longer route on day one. But somewhere between 5 and 9 is when I typically see people. And people that make it here between 5 and 9, good for you. You did what you had to do, and you're probably going to be fine. Take your day off. I'll talk to you the next day. I'll give you the route through the desert, and you have a pretty good chance of making it. But if you come squeaking in at like 11:59 and you start at 1 in the morning, I would say that probably you really need to rethink your plans. So day one is there to give you an idea of what you're getting into. And if you don't have any trouble with day one and you're able to, the nav is good, you got in pretty good shape, your bike's not trashed, you're not trashed, well, then you're Tour of Idaho material. You can probably make it. But you're going to find things that are as hard deeper in the tour. And no day is easy. So when I say day 1 and day 8 are the 2 hardest, they're all hard. I mean, they're all within spitting distance of what you just did. There are very few days in the tour that anybody would call easy. In fact, day 10 is the only one that I would call easy, and it's long as hell. So there you go. So you get to the border. You should there around sunup. And when you ride, you're going to ride a series of single-track trails. You're going to cross a highway. The first thing that always happens is people go, well, on the MVUMs, this is shown as not a trail or it's a foot trail. And on you say go up here. Well, when you get there, you're going to see it's a dirt road. It's another reason that you can't pay much. The MVUMs are just not Bible. I guess that's what I'm saying. You're going to ride up a really long climb, about a 3,300 foot climb in a few miles. So it climbs just really steeply. There are people that have fragged their clutch there, a half an hour into the tour. The first bonus section of the day is there. What I'm going to do with these bonus sections this year is I told everybody that The 2 bonus sections that are available on day 1, I'm going to make worth a half a point apiece. To balance that out, deeper in the tour, there's a couple of pretty easy challenge sections on day 4 that I'm also going to make worth a half a point apiece. Every one of the rest of them will be worth 1 point. On day 1, I would not do any of the bonus sections at all. Don't do either of them. All they do is they suck up time. They're short, but there's no reason for you to do any of them. Look, if you have a flat tire, you got to get it fixed. You still got to get to Pocatello before midnight. There's no exception to that midnight rule. Doesn't matter if you have a flat tire. Doesn't matter what happens. You've got to be to Pocatello by midnight. So don't do a bonus section and don't do the challenge section on day 1 either. There's plenty of stuff later in the tour when you're not quite as much under the gun. So, but there is a bonus section going up to the top of the first peak, Buck Peak. You're going to go across some ridges. It's really pretty riding. There's the famous rock slide photo that everybody wants. There should be enough sunlight by the time you get there to get a really good photo. You're going to go down to Reuben Hollow after that. There's been a new route that we dug down into Reuben Hollow. I didn't go there all last year, of course, but a couple years ago we flagged it really well. And for those of you who know, that trail down into Reuben Hollow is great except for the last 100 feet, and all of a sudden it just kind of went off a cliff down these big washed out gullies. Well, if just as you're about to turn left at the end of that trail that drops you right down into Reuben Hollow, when you look down those big steep gullies that don't look like they're that much fun, immediately to the right, just before you go down there, there's another trail that's cut that goes down, crosses the creek, and it should be well marked and in really good shape. So the only bit of unpleasantness in there we took care of. Climb up to the top of Oxford Peak. Once again, there is an out and back, a short hike that you have to do. It's a couple hundred yards. It's not very far at all, but get off your bike and hike it. It's not legal to ride your motorcycle up there. We expect you to do what you're supposed to do, get off your bike and hike. Also, you want to be very cognizant of the fact this bites about half the teams that are there every year. There's a cheater route around that quad trail up close to the top of Oxford Peak. You're going to get up and you're going to come to the top of this knoll and you're going to look down and you're going to, oh my God, what happened here? Because the quads have just completely torn up a couple hundred yards of trail. And you can ride down it, but you're saying, how the hell am I going to get back up this? Because it's steep and it's mush. It's horrible with big rocks in it. Mashed potatoes with boulders in the middle of it. Well, it turns out the world's greatest single-track bypass exists just slightly to the west of that trail, on the west side of that knob. And if you're paying attention, there's waypoints exactly where they need to be to guide you to that single track. Once you get on it, it's easy to follow. It goes through a little bit of a boulder field. That's the only technical part of it. But make sure you find that bypass. It's on your left on the way up the ridge, and then it'll be on your right on the way back down. After that, you're going to go down through Oxford Basin. It used to be that solo routes sort of diverged there, but it doesn't anymore. Everybody goes down now, crosses Interstate 15, and goes over to the Elkhorn complex on the west side of the freeway. That West Elkhorn Trail is a wonderful trail. The first couple of miles are a little bit gnarly. There's a few washouts there, but that's the trail where we all take our kids on their XR 100s. It's just a beautiful trail. You're going to have a ton of fun doing it. A little bit of side hilling, but not anything that should bother any of you. The 2 and 3 person route and the solo route diverge about 5 or 6 miles down that trail. Soloists get a really treat. You get to ride the West Elkhorn Trail all the way around to the quad trail that goes back up over the Elkhorn Range. 2 and 3 person teams are going to go up a canyon that is really pleasant until the very top. There's about 100-yard section at the top that's got basketball and larger size boulders. They don't move. They're embedded in the ground, but there's a rock garden you got to go through. So you get about 100 yards of Erzberg at the top. But since the rocks don't move, I think it's a fun trail. Yeah, I've ridden it on a loaded bike before, and it's not that bad. You just sort of have to pick your line. And even if you're not an Erzberg rider, if you just get up there and Fred Flintstone it a little bit and pick your lines pretty carefully, you're going to get up it without getting too tired and without your bike getting very hot. Once the soloists go around, they come over the Elkhorn Range on a quad trail, which is a nice trail from west to east. The three-person teams go back over that same quad trail from east to west. They kind of go around the west side of the Elkhorn Range, come back up. Some really pretty trails. None of them are difficult. It's a little long, though. It's a little bit of a loop that you have to do. But the soloist and the two-person teams pretty much head straight to something called Fence Line Trail. It takes the three-person teams a little longer to get there. Fence Line is one of my favorite trails. It's going to be open probably a week or so after I get back. I'm going to the Mojave this weekend to ride a little bit. Probably a week or so after I get back from that, I'll be able to ride Fence Line. It's an awesome trail. It opens early. It's called Fence Line for a reason, and that's that for a significant distance along that trail, you are uncomfortably close to a 3- and 4-strand barbed wire fence. It hasn't happened to my knowledge yet, but at some point somebody's going to get tangled up with that fence. I just know it, because you can basically play J.S. Bach violin tunes with your handlebars on the barbed wire in that fence as you're going down it if you modulate your speed just right. Love Fence Line. Route finding's a little bit of an issue because the cows get in there, and it's really tough to find your way around sometimes. When the trail crosses a creek, sometimes it doesn't go straight across the creek. It goes up the creek a little bit. If you don't see the trail coming right out on the other side of the creek, look always to your left and see if maybe that trail goes up a little bit before it crosses the creek, because in several of those creek crossings, it does just that. And that causes people an awful lot of confusion. They just miss the fact it wanders up 50 yards or something before it crosses the creek. It's fairly well marked, but there are a few places where you might have to sit down and get off your bike and look around a little bit for some tire tracks. Get to the end of Fence Line, and you're going to go down a road that unfortunately has got 3 or 4 gates in it that are a pain in the butt to open and close. That time of year, the gates are not always closed. If they're open when you get there, just ride through them and don't worry about it. But if they are closed, make sure that you close them back behind you. The solo route splits off at this point, and soloists get to go straight into Lava Hot Springs from here. So it saves you about 30 or 35 miles. The 2- and 3-person teams go south to Downata, and they go up over something called Sedgwick Peak. Sedgwick Peak is kind of cool, but it's just bumpy. It just adds distance. So we decided to cut the soloists some slack since we took them down Fence Line starting last year. And you get to go straight to Lava Hot Springs. Now, Lava is the place I would stop for gas. I hear people all the time go, God, yeah, we stopped for gas by the time we got to Downata or something like that. You should be able to make it to Lava. It's about 100 miles or something like that, 125 miles maybe, depending upon the route you took. But if you don't have any more range than that, you might be knackered a little bit. I get it if you just don't want to carry all the gas that you can carry. That makes sense to me. But if you're using a 4.5-gallon or bigger tank, which is what we recommend, you ought to be able to make it to Lava Hot Springs. And it's just going to make your day a lot quicker because Lava is also a good place to eat. The Sinclair station there, Sunnyside, great place to stop. They got pretty good food there, a lot of healthy food options too. You can get cold drinks there. You can fuel up your bike. There's shady places to sit, and it's right literally off the side of the trail, so it doesn't cost you any time. If you go into Downata, that's time that you burn because it's 5 miles or so up the road, 5 miles back. Doesn't sound like a lot, but all of a sudden you added 10 miles to your day, and if it were me, I would not do that. So, once you leave Lava Hot Springs, if you made it to Lava Hot Springs by 4 or 5 in the afternoon, you can feel pretty good about yourself. You made it there earlier than that, like by 2 or 3, and you're on the 2 or 3 person route, you ought to feel really good about yourself because you're honking. You're doing a pretty good job. Once you leave Lava Hot Springs, it is almost continuously technical riding all the way to Pocatello. So, you did a lot of that just getting to Lava Hot Springs, but you're going to get on something called a boundary trail pretty quick, and it is the rockiest, nastiest quad trail that bad dreams are capable of conjuring. It's just awful. And it's bumpy, and it's dusty, and it's hot, and it's in the sun that time of the day, and you're not going to like it very much. Not too far out of Lava Hot Springs. You go north out of Lava Hot Springs, you hit the boundary trail, and you got a choice. If you have any sense about you, you're going to turn left when you hit the boundary trail, and you're going to ignore the challenge section. Every year, because we tell people do not do the day one challenge section, there are people that say, well, we're better than all those guys, so we are going to do the day one challenge section. Almost uniformly, those folks regret that choice. It is not the intelligent choice. Jimmy did it, but Jimmy also did the version of day one that's shorter than the version that we have right now. I don't know if he would have done it. He's certainly a talented enough rider that he could. There are many tour vets that are perfectly capable of doing the current day one and the challenge section, but most of them wouldn't recommend it. They'd tell you, no, you're crazy. It's hot, and it's really tough. So let me pull it up here. I want to look at this on the 100K map. So, but nonetheless, we tell people, and it's the same thing every year. We say, it's a better idea if you don't do this. Everybody goes, yeah, you don't know how great I am. That's okay. Show us. So people get up there and they insist on doing this thing. Well, you're going to find out it starts out incredibly mellow. So you're going to ride up Reed Canyon, and you're going to ride several miles up Reed Canyon and go, what in the world are these guys talking about? There's no problem with this trail. And then you're going to get to the last mile of Reed Canyon where it starts to climb real steeply. And look, I know what's going on there. We look at the PLB tracks. I look at the tracks later on. I know exactly the reason it took you, 45 minutes to an hour to ride that last mile. It's because you were pushing, pulling, and tugging your bike up over all those tree roots and up those steep gullies. You're riding fully loaded bikes. It's 90 degrees outside. Some tour vets put a lemonade stand halfway up it. There's a sign there that says lemonade stand, and they always stock it with lemonade during tour season, which is kind of a joke. You're insane if you do it, and that's not even the hardest part of it. Once you get to the top of Reed Canyon, if you decided to do it and you get to the top of Reed Canyon, if you come to your senses at the top of Reed Canyon, there's a bailout trail. There's a trail that goes due south that's marked in purple on the maps, and in the route description it says, this is a legitimate shortcut back to the regular route if you want to do that. I recommend you do that because the part that you just did is not the most difficult part of that challenge section. You got miles of stuff ahead of you that's worse with some significant side hill issues in a couple of spots. There are people that have lost their bikes off a couple of those side hills in places where we didn't think we were ever going to get them out. I know of at least a couple of times we've had to go back in there with razors and hack our way through the jungle and stuff to get bikes out that really tumbled down some of those side hills. And climbing Robber's Roost from east to west is much harder than the way that we do it. You go over Robber's Roost in the opposite direction that we do it, and it's a far worse climb if you do that. So you want to, you're the best rider in the world, and all of us are a bunch of old guys that don't know what we're talking about. You go knock yourself out. But when you've exhausted yourself by doing that challenge section and you still got 60, 80 miles to go to get into Pocatello, we tried to tell you. There are people who are strong riders, Erzberg-level competitors, who have gone to the urgent treatment center for intravenous fluids after having done that challenge section on a hot day. It's that difficult. I ride it all the time, but I ride it on a 300 that's unloaded, and it kicks my butt some days when it's hot out getting through that thing. Riding on a fully loaded tour bike is a basic nightmare. I know that Jimmy tells people, well, I think you should do it because there's stuff that's that hard, deeper in the tour. Not if you stay off the challenge sections. It's a tough one. It's very technically difficult. So if you do what I think is the best thing, you're going to go west on the Boundary Trail. You're going to come around. It's going to be in the sun. It's going to be late in the day. It's going to be hot, and it's going to suck. But you're going to go in and out of some deep gullies and up some big climbs. And you better hope it's not raining because that clay really gets slick when it starts to rain. And again, I've seen pro-level riders try to ride up some of those hills when the water's rolling down them, and it's almost futile in a couple of places. If it does rain, just wait it out, give it a half an hour or so to dry out, and then try it because they dry really fast. But while that top layer of clay has got a lot of water in it stuff, it's just as slick as it can be. So you're going to do several descents and climbs. The trail's fairly easy to follow. It's a beautiful trail visually. It's just that the quads tear the hell out of it, so the hill climbs aren't any fun. When you're not on a hill climb, it's a nice trail. The rocks don't move, and the scenery's pretty good. A lot of people blow right past the Robber's Roost entrance, even though there's a waypoint right there and a sign there that you ought to see. A lot of people really come blazing down that trail faster than they should be riding, and they blow past it. You'll discover that pretty quickly, but Robber's Roost, the way we do it, from west to east, is not that bad. There's one really torn up section that's got a bypass cut around it. When you get up there, you should see the flagging, and there's a way you can kind of ride at first to the left and then to the right. You crisscross the old trail. There's some switchbacks that we put in up there. Right at the top, there's some places there's nothing we can do about because there's some side hilling issues up there. You're at the top of this big steep canyon, and a couple places you don't want to fall off the trail. I think you'd be all right, but your bike might go 700 or 800 feet in a couple of spots. There's a couple of tree roots you got to get over, but anybody that got to that point is not going to have undue trouble getting up there. It's technically the most difficult part of the day just because it's elongated. Once you get to the top of that, you know, if you're there before dark, you're going to get to Pocatello, because after that, riding down the other side is not trivial, but it's easier than riding up. Once you hit the boundary trail on the other side, you're basically good to go. So you're going to ride quad trails all the way up to Income Pass. You're going to ride down. You're going to do there's one more beautiful single track trail, the South Fork of Inman Creek Trail, that's just marvelous right at the end of the day. And if you're on schedule, you should still be there in daylight. It should be, 6, 7 o'clock at night, maybe. Somewhere between 5 and 7 is probably when you're there. And it's just this beautiful little single track trail that goes for about 5 miles down this creek, crosses the creek a couple times. And everybody remembers that as one of the highlights of the trip, even after you ride 9 more days of trails. You're going to pop out to the little town of Income. I wouldn't recommend stopping there, but there's several places to stop if you need gas or fuel or a little snack or something like that. But you got your final sprint into Pocatello. There's nothing we can do because of some private land that we lost access to. So you're going to blast about 5 or 6 miles down a U.S. highway, US 30. You're going to head to Black Rock Canyon, and the 2-person and the 3-person teams all take different routes through the Black Rock Canyon area. All of them sort of merge again on the top of Chinese Peak. Then you roll 3 miles from the top of Chinese Peak down to the flagpole. By the way, I recommend you actually go to the top of Chinese Peak and look around too. The route itself doesn't quite go to the top, but while I was up there, it's like 100 yards or something from where the trail is to the top of the peak. No more than a quarter of a mile. As you go on the road. As a crow flies, I'm pretty sure it's about 100 yards, maybe 200. But I would go up there and look around because it's really pretty up there. And when you look back, you can see everything you've ridden that day. And when you look off to the northwest, you can see basically the next 2 to 3 days of the tour. So it won't take you very long. It's a fun thing to do. Then you're going to roll down to the flagpole. And as long as I know you're coming, and as long as it's not way too early or way too late, I'm going to be there waiting for you. I try to... Too early is hardly ever a problem, but I have kids, so I got to go pick them up from school and stuff. So I'm usually home for good around 5 or 6 o'clock at night. Very rarely does anybody ever beat me there. A few soloists have, but I try to stay up when I know teams are coming through, and unless it looks like it's going to be super late, I'll probably be waiting for you at the flagpole. Have some PBRs for you, some waters, whatever it is that you want. That's your day one. So let me look through the feed here. That took exactly how long I thought it would take. All right, let's see if we got any questions here. I see comments. Hey, JJ, how you doing, brother? See David Powell, how you doing? I bet it's not snowing in Texas, is it, David? Not right now. Yep, 17 degrees, August 15th in Stanley, Idaho. Again, you can ask the Hillbillies. You can ask Jeff Jensen. You can ask Brett Asper. There's a ton of tour vets that will tell you that heat is not always the only problem that you have to worry about on the Tour of Idaho. There are days when you can be going through temperatures that are up around 100 in the morning, and at night it can be like 35 degrees and sleeting on you. So you have to be prepared for all of it. Let's see. Is the Idaho ArcGIS layer an acceptable base map? Anything's an acceptable base map as long. Look, what you're talking about is the MVUM maps, and those are just fine. Go ahead and put them up there. Again, the only thing that you cannot do is create your own route or use a track to superimpose over top of that. You can use any base map you want. Just make sure the only thing that you superimpose over the top of that are my waypoints. You're going to navigate by the waypoints that I provided in any additional ones up to whatever number we said was acceptable that you add to it. Brian Atkins, it is one of the two toughest days. Again, there's nothing tougher than day one. I think day 8 is as tough. I think if I were going to describe it in my own mind, and everybody's sensitivity to this is going to be a little bit different, I would describe day 1 as physically tougher, and I would describe day 8 as mentally tougher. And you're hearing that from a guy that did a lot of solo mountaineering in the day. But day 8 works on me, and I've talked to a lot of tour vets, and they all experience the same thing. Day 8, you really have the feeling that you're way out there by yourself, that nobody's coming down that trail for weeks unless it's another Tour of Idaho rider. And you're a long way from help. You know, your phone doesn't work anywhere. The trails are overgrown and brushy, and it just has a feel of remoteness that day 1 doesn't have. So even though most of the trails on day 8 I think are easier than most of the trails on day 1, it just has a mental aspect to it that's tough. Plus, it's day 8. I mean, you've been getting the snot kicked out of you for 8 days by the time you get there, so you're bound to be a little bit tired. Day 8 is traditionally where people have had trouble with really bad weather too. You're in some pretty deep forests, so if it's raining or snowing or something like that, it's pretty easy to get knackered pretty quick. Caleb Gillum, that is addressed in the challenge point rules and is addressed in the route description, and I think you probably actually know what the answer to that is, and it's what you think. Let's see. Do we have anything else here? Because I'm going to sign off early if we don't have any more questions. All right. Well, I can't really think of anything else to talk about. Last couple of years, everybody has been really good about taking the optional day off in Pocatello. We call it optional, but it's really not optional. You're nuts if you don't take that day off. And a lot of people go, well, why is it that you have to take the second day off? Why don't you give us like a day off halfway through the tour? Well, the only reason that there is a day off period is because I live in Pocatello, so I get to sleep in my own bed at the end of day 1. And when this thing first started getting kind of big, somebody said, hey, you know, you get kind of a cheat because you get to ride to your own house at the end of the first day. And I said, well, you know what? That's not exactly a completely unreasonable point of view. So I'm going to give everybody the exact same opportunity that I have. But I can't invite you all to live at a house that you don't live in. But what I can do is say you can take a day off so that you have all the time in the world to sort of go through your gear, to make any adjustments that you need to make. Because I have my garage and all my parts and stuff are here. You can go to a power sports shop in Pocatello. It just levels the playing field. Having said that, I never took the day off in Pocatello any of the times I did it, but the tour was also different the last time I did it than it is now. I would say that, there's now about 80, somewhere in the 80s, I think, people that have finished the tour have earned a jersey number. Of those, let's call it 80 people. Of those 80 people, I'd say 75 of us are all on the same page about that. There's a few guys that have ideas that are different, but the vast majority of people who have done the tour say it is nothing but a benefit to you to take that day off, and you should do it. How early can day 1 be pre-ridden? That's an excellent question. I'll let you guys know when when I'm able to get through it. But typically that starts sometime in June. There's a big snow patch on the top of Oxford Peak that persists till pretty late that can be tough to get through. And the top of Robbers Roost can be a little tough to get through. Typically, that's sometime in June, although it has been as late as the beginning of July. But I'll let everybody know when you can do that. And by the way, pre-riding day one is a perfectly legal and legitimate thing to do. And if you live in this area, in fact, even if you don't, if you can get here to do it, I recommend that you do it. Because if you can ride day one, but use some sense. I mean, don't show up on an unloaded bike. If you're going to come all the way here and pre-ride day one, ride it in your tour rig. It's a good shakedown cruise. Go out, ride the thing, see how you feel at the end of it. If you can't make it, probably you need to put it off for next year. Every year we get people that show up, in June, and they have difficulty pre-riding day one. They go, well, I just need to train a little bit harder and it'll still be okay in another 6 weeks or so. Probably not. Probably you need to sit back, watch how people do this year, and do it again. Day one is a bar, and we designed that bar carefully with a lot of thought about the lesson that we wanted people to get out of it. And it'll tell you right away whether or not you're likely to be successful in the rest of the tour. Now, look, everybody's different. All situations are different. It could be that, you have some trouble in day one just because it's not your day, or you have a mechanical issue or something like that. You barely squeak it into Pocatello, and you might do brilliantly in the rest of the tour. That hadn't happened yet, but it's within the realm of possibility. All situations are different. All of us are different. You never know what's going to happen. We had people last year that showed up where, it was on a hot day and they were on bikes that were race bikes that I don't think they had actually done some of the things they should do to convert it back to trail use. Their gasoline boiled and they're just knackered. They're excellent riders, but there's nothing they can do. The gas in their tanks is boiling, and you got to stop until you can figure out a way to make that not happen. So there's all kinds of things that can go wrong like that. But generally speaking, you should be able to get to Pocatello before dark if you're not having any trouble, and that it should be the thing that guides you about whether or not you can make it, the rest of the way. One, use your superior judgment, not your superior riding skills. I'm going to steal that because that's excellent. In motorcycle world, everybody knows two things: their own name and how to do stuff better than everybody else. And I hear it all the time. It's interesting to me that the most talented riders that I have met through the tour are also uniformly the most humble. So when I get people that show up, like the Holy Rollers a few years ago, or Michael Knight and his crew last year, the Ute-Hos, or the Lee brothers, some of these guys from Canada that come down and put the boots to it. These guys from Canada are always really good. And Brian Millis, he's from Canada. Trying to think, and I don't mean to slight anybody whose name I can't remember right now, but we get brilliant riders. Jimmy Lewis. People like that come do it. They're the nicest people in the world. They don't come down here and they don't tell me that, oh, you don't know what you're doing. This is way easier than you said it was, yada, yada, yada. They show up and they're like, you know what? This, it's pretty close to what you said it would be. So a pretty good gauge is like, I get a feel after a while, when I'm talking to people, when somebody's just constantly pushing back, like that can't be right. No, you don't know what you're talking about. That sounds like an awful long time to cover such a short distance. You go knock yourself out. Look, we're telling you this. I'm telling you this. Everybody else is going to tell you this for a reason, which is that we would rather see you succeed than fail. But if you don't want to listen to it, just don't listen to it. Just go do your deal, but just don't be fussing at me when things go south. There's an entire group of people called the Ride-to-Hos who exist specifically to do that. They came in here, a lot of those guys came in here, they were motor mouths. I try to tell them, look, what you were doing is probably not going to be successful. In many cases, it was not. And they bitch forever. Go do that. Don't be that guy this year. Don't be that girl this year. Don't be that group this year. Listen, understand that what I and everybody else is telling you is for your benefit. We really want you to get through it. I don't want you to spend months and a lot of your money planning for something that doesn't work out. It's a lot better if you come out here and you have a really good time. not everybody makes it. Look, if everybody made it, it wouldn't be worth talking about. The fact that not everybody gets through this whole thing, sometimes it's not even their fault, it's just bad luck, is kind of what makes it special. Some things have to go right, and you have to have a little bit of good luck, and you have to have a lot of the right kind of skill to be able to do this. But we're here to help you, man. We're going to try to tell you, look, this is what works, and do it like this, please. And if you do, the odds of success go way up. There's some stuff, that's personal level. You got to have this particular kind of tire or something like that. I get that. I may think it's a bad idea, but I'm not going to hold that against you. But when you're constantly telling me that I don't know anything about how hard these trails are and stuff like that, well, okay, genius, you go out and do what you want to do. I think I know them pretty well because I ride them all the time and a lot. All right. I don't see any more questions, and we're bumping up on time right now. Probably next week, if I were guessing, I'd say we'll talk about day 2. I went out into the desert a little bit today and did a little bit of work on day 2, and I'm really excited about how that's going to work out this year. I think that the part where you're going to have to just navigate the old-fashioned way with a compass and a map and a little bit of dead reckoning is going to be a ton of fun. It won't be this is not going to be the thing that does you in. The only thing that this is going to do is, once again, it's going to serve as a filter for the people who got to have a track to get everywhere. And every year, I know there are people that show up with tracks that they got from other people. This is just a little bit of a filter to filter those people out. You won't be able to have a track that'll get you through about 40 miles of desert out there. You're going to have to follow some directions. This compass bearing for this many miles, look for this road. And it'll all be written down, and there'll be some I'll have a couple waypoints that I'll probably give you just to make sure that there's a couple places that you can get to if you get too thoroughly lost. You're not going to expire out in the desert if you get lost. In that part of the desert, there's roads everywhere. And if you have any kind of a decent map, the CalTopo maps are fine. Any of the DeLorem maps are fine. You'll be able to find your way out if worse comes to worse. And if you don't stick exactly on my route, it won't be a tour ender. It'll probably cost you a challenge point or so. We'll come out with some fairway that if you're not able to follow the route exactly and you've got to do something else, there will be a mild penalty, but it won't be a disqualification. It won't be a tour ender. And I think you'll have a lot of fun with it, so I wouldn't be too fearful of it. All right, everybody. So next week we'll talk day 2 unless I come up with something better to do. Thanks a lot for spending some time with me tonight, and I'll see you in about a week. Cheers.